It's such a privilege to be here. There's nothing more important for me than being connected to organisations and individuals who are truly making a tangible impact, and Peter Urbane and Hands Across the Water are doing exactly that. But right now, I'm going to take you to a different space. I want you to imagine this. It's 45 degrees, it's 90% humidity, and you have got sweat that's dripping from your forehead, down your face, and it's splashing into your mouth. And it's that real salty type of sweat. Your heart is pounding hard and fast. In fact, it has never gone that hard or fast before. And that's right. All of you in this room right now have run 800 kilometres over 13 days across one of the hottest, driest landscapes on the planet. And you're not even a quarter of the way to the finishing line. You can't help but ask yourself, how the hell did you get here? And it looks a bit like this. And for those who can't conceptualise that because it seems a little bit too far-fetched and maybe just a tad bit crazy, I want to show you a small video.
I really don't do well in the cities. I find it really claustrophobic.
There's like these little moments and I'm like, holy shit. How am I going to do this? Yeah, it's been a rough 12 hours, 10 hours. Yeah, I feel like I'm cooking on the inside. My stomach is really, really sore. People would normally be in bed after what I went through last night, not going out for another 60k.
This isn't an elite sport. This is all mind. You do it because you want to and you believe in it. It's gonna hurt. Who's sitting there right now and they just can't help but think, it's funny, when we're kids, we're always asked, what do you want to be when you grow up? It's this really pivotal question, but it's actually one that we stop getting asked as we get older. When we're young, we think that anything is possible. It's what's called a beginner's mind. But at some point as we age, we start to believe in limitations, boundaries, glass ceilings, and you know what? I am a living proof to tell you that these are all illusions. Is anyone here a fan of Bob Dylan's music? Any fans? Okay, a couple of people after my own heart. He has got this incredible lyric that goes, he not busy being born is busy dying. Now, I can't do it anywhere near as cool as Bob or as Michael, but to me this means life equals growth. And when we stop exploring the new, we start to become stuck, stagnant, and at worst we can actually begin to go backwards. To live big, we actually have to be willing to enter into new territory. And suffering is actually a part of it. It doesn't mean that we love that part of it, but it's necessary for growth. And when things inevitably go wrong in that unknown space, as they always do, I think the most powerful question that we can ask is, what is the next best plan? Because it takes real courage to adapt, to be uncomfortable, and to not be at the mercy of the expectations of other people. The way that other people define us, particularly when we're young, can play a huge role in who we become. The narratives of our lives, these stories that we continually keep telling ourselves. Now, when I was a kid, I told myself a lot of stories. I was this very short, uncool, uncoordinated kid who was always the last to be picked in team sports. Whenever the sports teacher said that teams were going to be picked through a schoolyard pick, I'd be standing in that line and I just wanted to be invisible. Who remembers the schoolyard pick and feels uncomfortable by hearing it? Yes. You know what? It's where the teacher picks two captains and they pick their team one at a time. From perceived strongest to maybe most popular student to perceived weakest, maybe least popular student. And as the people in the group kept kind of dwindled down and there was less people standing on that line, I just remember feeling more and more uncomfortable, feeling like everyone was staring at me for not being good at something. And sometimes I had this real privilege of actually getting to choose my own team because I was the last student on the line and there was an odd number of students in the class. It was just amazing. I remember making this really unconscious link that I didn't belong in the sporting arena, which is pretty embarrassing for a kid in Australia because so much of your social currency in the schoolyard is based on your abilities in sports. So I've got to tell you, when 20 years later popped around and I had run from the west to the east of India on an expedition that I created myself, I just realised that none of us are defined or limited by our pasts. And let me say it right here and now, short, uncool kids can run. You know, I actually never thought about being an endurance athlete. As Andrew said, you know, I was a lawyer by trade, and I just didn't grow up in a family of athletes. I would say that I grew up in this family of thinkers. My mum, she has never run a day in her life. She's this demon on the lawnmower, but no way for running. And my dad, he had polio as a child, so he now has one leg that's faster than the other. So whenever he runs, it's actually quite humorous, and my sister spent a lot of our childhood kind of laughing at Dad when he gave it a crack, which doesn't sound so humorous anymore. I actually decided to study something that was more aligned to my natural talents. So I enrolled in a double degree in performing arts and law. I had these aspirations to either be, a lawyer working for an international organisation like the UN, or being an actress on Home and Away. Definitely trying to hedge my bets there. One day I was in class and we were doing a play and the director casted a professional actor to be in that play with us. And he casted the most incredible actor, Bud Tingle. It was a huge coup for him to be in our cast, and he was so generous with his time and information. And one day he stood before the group of us and he shared what he thought was the secrets to a successful life. And he said the secret to a successful life for him, and that he'd followed the entire way through his life, was to just say yes, which is why he was there doing that play with us at that point in time. He said, it sounds so simple, but when you just say yes, you meet incredible people, you go on amazing adventures, and luck, wow, it will just follow you wherever you go. I was looking at this 85-year-old man who was obviously one of the most incredible actors in Australian history. And he said yes was the epitome for him of success. I, on the other hand, was 25, full of potential and promise, but whenever opportunities were thrown my way, I was pretty inclined to say no. If I wasn't convinced of what the journey would look like, and certainly what the end destination would hold, I had to say no. This part of my life was very much characterised by this fear of failure, what I guess I now know as the imposter syndrome. I couldn't let that monkey off my back memory of being that kid on the line and just not belonging. And so because of Bud, I decided to create this new mantra. My new mantra was, if you want something that you've never had, you've got to do something that you've never done. And now there's a caveat to this, because it doesn't just mean saying yes to everything. For some people, they have so many opportunities that they don't know where to start, and so they never do. And other people, they just wait for opportunity to seek them out. And unfortunately, I'm going to let you know that for most of us, it doesn't work that way. You have to be willing to create the life that you want. This is your life. It's your race to run. Bronnie Ware is an Australian nurse who cares for patients in their final 12 weeks of life. And she actually started to record some of their dying epiphanies. And do you want to know what was the number one regret that she kind of started to record? It was this. I wish I had the courage to live a life true to myself and not the life that others expected of me. And this rung very, very deep with me. Thanks to Bud, I went on this yes quest to experience a series of once-in-a-lifetime opportunities. I went out to the US and I backpacked across 30 states. I would sleep under the stars of the national parks, and I remember that feeling of isolation and insignificance, and it was a beautiful thing. I went into the middle of the Australian desert and I performed circus arts for Indigenous kids. And you know what? I have never been laughed at so much in my life, and it was okay. I went back to the US and I volunteered for a not-for-profit organisation that was providing free defence for prisoners on death row. But do you want to know what was the most unexpected transformation on my yes quest? Well, it was signing up for my first marathon. I would love to tell you that I crushed it and I was amazing at the 42.2 kilometres. Reality was I really sucked. And the only reason that I got to the finishing line is because of that girl right there. She physically and mentally dragged me through the final 10 kilometres. And trust me, gravel rash, it's a real thing. when we're kind of transitioning from something that we do know to something that we don't know, there's this clunky phase in the middle where we're trying to find our way. It can be incredibly uncomfortable, but this is also the space where so many people actually tend to quit. Whenever we enter new terrain, and it can be in a new job, it can be in a new relationship, new hobby, there's always this period of rapid adaptation. And for me in that race, doing those final 10 kilometres, I didn't think I could walk another, step. And somehow I managed to do it. And when I got to the finishing line, it didn't actually matter how ugly it looked and how painful it was in those moments. It became this huge personal breakthrough for me. And I just was left wanting to explore more of myself, more of myself and more of the world. And I couldn't help but think to myself, I have run 42.2 kilometres. I wonder what it would be like if I tackled 4 250-kilometre desert ultramarathons in the hottest, coldest, driest and windiest deserts on Earth. I mean, how hard could it really be? Well, this is what it looked like.
They are the driest, windiest, hottest, and coldest deserts on Earth. 4 hostile environments on 4 different continents. These remote locations serve as the proving grounds for the ultramarathon series rated by Time magazine as one of the most challenging endurance competitions in the world, Racing the Planet's 4 Desert Series.
It's 100 degrees out, the wind is blowing, and it's like someone's got a hairdryer on your face.
Dehydration is going to be the big issue today. Can't breathe too good.
These rough country foot races, each covering over 150 miles, are the equivalent of running 6 marathons in 5 days over extreme and diverse terrains, with temperatures ranging from over 120 degrees Fahrenheit to a bone-chilling 30 degrees below zero. Those willing to take on these unforgiving deserts will attempt to run, walk, or crawl toward the finish line, carrying everything they need to survive: clothes, food, medical supplies, sleep gear, in a pack on their backs.
Every muscle in my body is aching.
I'm very close to my pain barrier.
It's the kind of experience destined to provide the thrill or the heartbreak of a lifetime.
So obviously this is a very natural progression from a near-failed marathon experience. I had no idea what I was doing. In fact, my survival strategy was really simple. It was adopt an attitude of relentless forward motion so that slow progress could still be progress. I knew I was entering a space that was so beyond my past experiences, and I decided that ego and pace couldn't be the focus. And I stood on that start line of the race, looking at what I thought were the most incredibly physically impressive humans of my life, and I was filled with fear. I mean, trust me, I saw calf definition that you've never seen before. And the gun went off, and so did everyone. And I really went at a slow and conservative pace. I really felt that I needed to adapt myself into the environment. And the first race was in the Atacama Desert in Chile, and it was the driest desert on Earth. What I quickly saw is that people began to drop out of the race, like really, really quickly. And these people often looked incredibly impressive human beings as athletes. And what I discovered is that in the face of overwhelm, particularly when it's constant overwhelm, people feel that they have so few options at their disposal. Now, because I wasn't going at capacity, I decided to create a checklist of everything I could do to keep myself in the game. But I knew I needed to do it before I got to capacity. So I started to think of all the things that I could do before quitting. And those were, I could buddy up with another runner to distract myself from the pain. I could slow my pace down. I could eat some food. I could put on some music. And you know what? Chariots of Fire has been proven to work a real treat in moments like these. I mean, I wanted to do everything that I could do to put one shaky foot in front of the other. What's so important to note is that, you've got to create a strategy to get in the game. But to keep in the game, you've always got to create your next best plan. And that is the most important thing. Often we're in a circumstance and all of a sudden this beautiful plan that you spent so much time putting together isn't serving the circumstances that are in front of you. The greatest thing that you can do is learn to be able to detach and to be agile, to pivot, to create something that suits those circumstances. And so not only did I get to the finishing line, but I did become the first woman in the world to complete the 4 Deserts Grand Slam, a race that had only been completed by 2 male professional athletes. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. I actually made a big series of mistakes after that. I actually felt that I had to continually keep topping myself. Higher races, longer, faster. I did the whole gamut over the next couple of years. And this is what happens when people, start to test themselves. That and everyone else keeps asking you, so, what's next? I wanted to say a bloody good lie down, but I felt compelled to continually step up. And I found myself in this race in northern India. It's called La Ultra the High, and it was titled The World's Cruelest Race because it took competitors to run 222 kilometres non-stop between the world's highest motorable pass, which peaked at 6,000 metres above sea level. So obviously breathing is a real struggle in an environment like this. I was dehydrated, hypothermic, and pushed well beyond my capabilities. And what I realised is that my reason for being there was no longer strong enough. It wasn't compelling enough to cope with the suffering that I was experiencing. Some people are motivated by the win, and that is totally fine. But I was getting to a point where I wanted a greater test than how physically and mentally strong I could be. I loved to run, but I wanted it to transport into a different meaning. And I wondered if I could use this newfound love of running to connect it to social justice causes around the world. It was a career path that did not exist at the time. And trust me, I rigorously checked Seek. There was nothing there. I realised I was going to have to create something which was my next best plan. And that's really where the run across India truly began. I wanted to use running as a vehicle to be able to explore the various barriers to quality education that children across India actually face. And I thought if I can move my body every single day and meet communities that are affected by these issues, these barriers to quality education, and share that on a digital platform, then maybe I could raise a lot of money to support 6 education programs. When I finished that run, I was completely spent, and so much spent that I really struggled to communicate that experience. There's a bunch of you in this room who have done the ride in Thailand, and you probably will understand what it's like when it's hard to put into words what that experience is really like. And so I typically did it through numbers. I would say I ran 3,253 kilometres over 77 days. I wore 6 pairs of shoes, 1,100 bowls of dal, which can be super dangerous because it gets things running in this whole other direction. And because I simplified the experience, people felt that I just rocked up in that space and gave it a crack. What I didn't share with them is it took actually 2 years of the most rigorous preparation of my entire life to be capable enough to give it a go. I would create this route with my Indian partners, which was devised on World Vision programs that I would visit across the country, from the west to the east of the country, and I peaked up to the Himalayas twice. I assembled this team of experts from around the globe, some who came with me to India and some who worked remotely. I really clarified what my mission was, and I learnt to test it rigorously until it landed with people in a sense that their first response wasn't just, "You're crazy." I needed them to think that it actually would be something that could make an impact. And you know what? Of course I trained to be there. People did start to think I was a little bit crazy because I put a treadmill in a hot yoga studio. And when classes finished for the day, I would go into the studio, I would turn down the lights, I would crank up the heat to 40 degrees, and I would run up to midnight many nights. I was doing whatever I thought that it would take to be ready. And then I got to India and realised I hadn't even scratched the surface of how hard that project would be. To say that India is hot is an absolute understatement. It was bloody hot. I was running for up to 14 hours a day. I started in the desert in Rajasthan where I ran 800 kilometres. It got to 45 degrees, it reached 100% humidity more than once, and the heat was searing off the bitumen, going through my body, and it just brought my lungs to the absolute capacity and brought my mind there as well. I was running on the side of the road because I was trying to avoid the cars that were swooping past me quite fast. The problem was I was constantly running on this slope. And so every single step that I was taking started to bring my body into imbalance, and then I started to get some pretty bad injuries. I really wasn't in a great place. From week 2 to week 3, it was very hard to run. And that was quite a hit on my ego because I definitely visualised running across India to mean running. And I couldn't do that at times. Not at one point did I question my reason for being there. You know, when your purpose is strong, it's amazing how much you can endure. But if I was to be brutally honest with myself and everyone else, I started to wonder, is the human body actually designed to endure that type of pain and to not create permanent damage? I was no fun to be around. I was running with the day with pain, and at night I was riddled with fear of when I'd actually be forced to stop. And at one point I just hit rock bottom. And there actually is a beauty in hitting rock bottom because it puts in very clear light what are your options. And I had 2 of them. My first one was to quit, but the other one was to create the next best plan. And I realised that my body was suffering, but my mind wasn't making it any better with my thoughts either. Every single day when I finished the run, I clearly needed to recover, but I was fueling it with toxic fears which were not actually helping me. And so what I started to do is I started to create some daily rituals. Every single day when I finished the run, regardless of how bad it was, and then regardless how not to plan that it went, I would throw it over my shoulder and I'm like, that's great, that's done. And I would focus on recovery in the next day. I got clear on the fundamentals of recovery, which interestingly are the fundamentals of happiness. Eat good food, drink plenty of fluids, get rest as much as you can in whatever circumstance you're in, and be kind to yourself and the people around you. It's that simple, and you know what? The simplest things are simple because they actually work. The moment I made that shift, things started to get better. And the reason they got better is because my mind and body had the space to do what this human body is capable of, which is adapt and heal. You know, I finished that run on the day 77, and I was the strongest that I'd ever been. I had no injuries, even though I was riddled with injuries early in the run. And I just want to show you a little bit what that project looked like.
That opportunity to be able to go to those communities and keep connected to why I'm doing this has been pretty much the major source of why I've been able to keep moving forward. There's been so many reasons I would have told my body to stop doing what I'm doing, but when I've met different community groups doing things that are powerful and sustaining for their community, it puts it in perspective that moving one step in front of the other is actually a really simple thing to do.
So I have, run in some of the most extreme and inhospitable locations on the planet. And the greatest things that I've learnt is that you have to be open-minded to the process and what that end destination will be. And I think the greatest lesson for me is that I've learnt that you can't avoid suffering, and nor should you actually try. It's this vital part of growth, and when your purpose is really strong, it's amazing how you can place it into perspective. But I actually still get surprised sometimes with how things turn out. I finished that run across India. We raised $200,000 to fund 6 education programs across the country. And I knew that the pendulum had to swing in the opposite direction when I got home, because there's only so much time that you can single-minded focus on things without needing to recover. And so there was 2 things that I did when I got home. The first thing was I didn't eat Indian food for a really, really long time. And the other thing is I started to binge watch reality TV, which I had never really done before. And I watched the 2016 season of Survivor in 3 days. And I was like, oh, this game's a piece of cake. I mean, I've just run across India. And so I applied with 24,000 people. And I guess you could say I was lucky to be one of 24 people to go on the 2017 series of the show. You know, I thought I would rock at this game. I thought I was mentally and physically really, really strong, and that I knew how to positively influence people to do what I wanted. I probably should have watched a couple more series of it to actually understand how it worked. You know, everything I had done to that point was where teams of people would come together. There might have been conflict and chaos and change, but we had this unifying goal to default upon, and I loved that. Survivor's the opposite, guys. It's 24 people who have conflicting missions, and your mission is to break down everyone else's mission. I wasn't very well versed at it, and I remember feeling back to that kid at primary school on that line and just not belonging. And you know what? Human beings, we have this huge need to belong. And, I got my torch snuffed out really quickly. But you know what I realised is from the experiences that shake us the most, they can actually provide the greatest outcomes. I remember being on that island going, who do I trust? Like, who can I belong to? And I remember seeing this guy here. He was 6'3", I'm 4'11.5", so obviously we were very different in height. He brought this leather jacket onto the island, which I thought was so weird. But guys, it's very, very cold in an island at night time when you're wearing not many clothes. So that leather jacket became a real treat for us. And very quickly we just formed this beautiful friendship. And to use Survivor speak, we formed an alliance, which was a little bit too overt, so we both got booted off 3 days apart. I've always had this fear that I would just not spend the time on my personal life. I've always been very professionally focused. I also had this fear that I wouldn't be one of those lucky ones to actually be able to be a mum. I think I had started to feel that I'd pushed my body so hard that I just wouldn't be able to be in that situation. But 15 months ago, as Andrew said, Mark and I welcomed our baby boy into the world, and it's been the most beautiful blessing of my life, and it's put a whole new perspective of what it's like to connect your passion with your purpose and how your professional and personal life can be in balance together. I don't always get it right. The pendulum doesn't always swing in the right direction at the right time, but I'm certainly learning to get better at it. You know, you have to be bold and brave enough to enter into the unknown, and it doesn't matter when things don't go to plan, because we're all capable of creating that next best plan, and that can be even better. Thank you very much.